I want to welcome you back to Thrive in the Word. Today we're going to be looking at the book of 2 Peter, the second chapter, verse number 4. Now let me just bring you up to speed. In verse number 3, actually verse number 2 and 3, Peter is talking about the false teachers and false prophets that have infiltrated the church. And now he begins to talk and he begins to teach about what's going to happen. And he talks about this thing called judgment. Now, I realize that judgment is not the favorite subject of most people. But you know what? Judgment is very, very real. And it's going to happen. Without any doubt whatsoever in my mind, I know that the judgment of God is going to come upon the earth. It's going to come upon unbelievers. I know that beyond any doubt. You say, well, how do you know that? Because of the examples that we have in Scripture. You see, Peter gives us some examples here. As we look at verse 4, and this is what verse 4 says, and it says, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to the pits of darkness reserved for judgment." You see, we have an example here, an example that happened before human life ever existed on the earth. What happened? Well, the Bible tells us that Lucifer led a group of angels in a rebellion against God. Now, this rebellion was basically Lucifer saying, I am taking the throne of God. Now, let's go ahead and read Isaiah 14. We're going to do a little Bible study today, okay? So Isaiah 14, verses 12 through 15, and this is what it says. "How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, and you have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, and I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the recesses of the north, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. Nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol and to the recesses of the pit." Now, that's Isaiah teaching us what happened. He's prophesying and he's showing us something that happened before the earth was even formed. And what was it? That Lucifer and some angels, a third of the angels, actually led a rebellion against God. Now, let's go back to 2 Peter. The second chapter, the 4th verse, and it says, "And God did not spare the angels when they sinned." You know what? If God didn't spare the angels, why do you think he's going to spare people? Now, these angels were in heaven with him. These angels were created by him. Now, these angels also had a free will. Now, God did not spare these angels. They made a decision to walk in rebellion towards God. They made a decision to elevate one of their own to the place of the throne of God. And God did not spare the angels. And now let's go on and says, "But he cast them into hell and committed them to the pits of darkness reserved for judgment." Right now, these fallen angels have been cast into the pit of hell. And what is this pit of hell? It's a place in which they are reserved for judgment. They are reserved there. They can never leave there. They are eternally cast into this pit. So God didn't spare the angels. But then Peter's not finished. He goes on in verse number 5, and this is what he says. "And did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly." Now, what's this talking about? This is talking about the pre-flood people. God speaks to Noah. He says, I'm bringing judgment upon the earth. Noah has a long time. I believe it was I don't know exactly, but it was a long time to build this ark. And the people were mocking him and they were laughing at him. And they were living in a completely sinful state. But what happened? God did not spare them. He did not spare them. See, those are the key words of both verse number 4 and verse number 5. God did not spare them. And we have people that are walking around the face of the earth. Some of these are false prophets, false teachers, and they're saying, well, God's going to spare us. No, he is not. Judgment will come upon the unbeliever. Judgment will come upon the earth. Just like it did in the days of Noah, God's going to rescue the righteous. He's going to rescue those who have taken a stand. He's going to rescue those who have prepared their lives to escape judgment. And by the way, it's not going to be escaping judgment with a wooden ark. The only way that you can escape judgment is by putting your trust in the wooden cross. The cross that bore Jesus. The cross that Jesus died upon. And trusting in his blood to spare you. And so we see here that without any doubt, we have two examples of God bringing judgment upon the earth. First of all, on angels. Second of all, on people here on the earth. God's going to bring judgment. And again, without any doubt, it's going to happen. Now let's quickly go to verse number 6. And if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to destruction by reducing them to ashes, having made them an example to those who would live ungodly lives, and if he rescued the righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men. Now, I notice my time is running out, but again, we see here an example. God is going to bring judgment. He brought judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Why do we think that God's not going to bring judgment? Now, Sodom and Gomorrah was a place of tremendous moral decay. Homosexuality was running rampant. Bestiality was running rampant. It was just a very, very immoral place. Well, God rescued Lot. And you know what? In our next podcast, we're going to talk about the rescue of God from an immoral generation.